Hello, folks. Happy warm Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing what you can do to stay safe, to stay cool. This afternoon I'm reflecting on what it means to be human. Kind of a big topic, I know, but I've been it's easy to get discouraged by the things that we see in the news. It's, I watched the wall-to-wall people partying on Memorial Day, and some of the things people said, that were quoted as saying, just felt so unnecessarily hurtful. If you don't want to get sick, stay home, and we have a right to be out here, and they can't tell us to wear masks, and they can't tell us to stay away from each other, and the stories of people getting violent when asked to wear a mask in a store, or some extreme cases of people spitting on each other and things like that. And I know those are the exceptions. At least I hope they are. But it makes me wonder what happens to our humanity, and any of us can get caught up in only worrying about ourselves, and sometimes that's our convenience, and sometimes that's what we perceive to be our rights and our independence, and that extends to people in power thinking somehow that the power they've been granted is absolute. And I just think about how a human being can kneel on another man's neck for 8-10 minutes while that man begs for air and ultimately loses consciousness and dies. And somehow I feel like we lose our basic humanity when we forget that each person we deal with has a story of their own and needs to be heard and needs to be respected. And there's all kinds of issues there with George Floyd. The persistent racism that just doesn't seem to end, and the disproportionate killing of black men by police, and that's all really important, and we have to figure out how to deal with it. But right now I want to just focus on our humanity, and for me, I don't want to just point my finger at pool parties in the Ozarks or racist police officer in Minneapolis or anything like that. I want to look at myself and think about the ways I've put myself first and not honored the humanity of another. In the end, we have to figure out how to live together. There's just no other way, because we're here living with each other. Anyway, so today you get 3 songs. I'm going to start with one of our favorite praise songs. It's called Breathe, and of course I'm thinking of George Floyd and lying there for 8 minutes saying, I can't breathe. this song is about how essential it is to breathe in that love of God and breathe in that spirit, and that God's presence is like the breath in our lungs and like our daily bread. After that, I'm going to play an old, I think it's a 60s song called Get Together. Come on, people now, smile on each other. Everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. And I'll end with one that's become a favorite of our choirs and our praise band at church called I Need You to Survive. Today's dedicated to our shared humanity, our need for each other, and our need to see God in each other, and our need to breathe that in. each other. I need you to survive. You need me to survive. We need each other. Together, we will survive. So stay connected, stay safe. It's good to be with you, and I'll see you again on Friday. Take care.